For 23 years, my wife Eleanor went to the bank every single Tuesday, like absolute clockwork. I never once asked her why, because I trusted her with my life, and with every single dollar I ever earned building bridges and interstate overpasses across the state of Tennessee. I always figured she was quietly saving for our retirement, or maybe sending money to some little charity she never talked about. I was a fool. When Eleanor passed away 2 weeks ago, I found out the real reason, and it turned the blood in my veins to ice. The woman I slept beside for over 4 decades had a secret life, written down in a small green ledger. That secret was about to destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. Before I tell you what was in that book, and how I made my own son wish he had never been born, please subscribe to the channel. If you have ever felt in your gut that someone close to you was lying, hit that like button. Let me know in the comments where you are watching from. My name is Richard Nash, and I am 72 years old. I spent my life pouring concrete and welding steel that still holds up half the highways in this state. I know how to spot a crack in a foundation before the whole structure collapses. But standing there in the pouring rain at Riverside Memorial Gardens last week, I missed the biggest crack of all. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the red Tennessee clay into slick mud around the gravesite. I stood staring at the polished walnut casket that held my Eleanor. I wanted to cry. I wanted to fall to my knees and scream at the gray sky. But I couldn't. I was completely numb. It was like every circuit in my body had shut down. I just stood there gripping the handle of my black umbrella so tight my knuckles turned white. Right next to me stood my son, Ethan. He is 44 years old and works in middle management at a logistics company in Nashville. He was putting on quite the show, shoulders shaking, dabbing his eyes with an expensive silk handkerchief. To anyone watching, he looked like the picture of a grieving son. But I built things for a living. I look at details. I look at stress points. And I saw something that didn't fit. Every time Ethan brought that handkerchief to his face, his left hand would adjust his cuff, pulling the sleeve of his black suit jacket back just enough to reveal a flash of gold. It wasn't just any watch. It was a solid gold Rolex President. I know the value of things. That watch cost $45,000. Easy. I stared at it while the rain hammered down on the gold band. Ethan makes $75,000 a year. He has a mortgage he complains about constantly. He has 2 kids in private school that I still help pay for. He drives a leased BMW. Where on earth did he get $45,000 for a watch I never bought it for him? Eleanor certainly didn't have that kind of money. Or so I thought. He caught me looking. For a split second, the grief vanished from his face. His eyes went hard and cold like a shark's. He quickly pulled the sleeve down, covering the gold, and went right back to sobbing. A cold feeling started in my stomach, and it wasn't from the weather. It was my gut telling me the foundation of my family was rotten. We went back to the house for the reception. I built this house with my own hands 35 years ago. Solid oak floors, riverstone fireplace. It was supposed to be our sanctuary. Now it was full of people eating casseroles and murmuring empty condolences. I sat in my leather armchair in the corner, watching. My daughter Emily was in the kitchen actually doing the work, making coffee, keeping everyone fed. She looked exhausted. But Ethan was circling the living room, looking at the paintings on the walls, the furniture, like an auctioneer appraising an estate sale. When the last guest finally left, Ethan didn't come over to ask how I was doing. He walked straight to me and sat on the ottoman in front of my chair. "Dad, we need to talk about logistics," he said, voice smooth, too smooth. "Can we not do this today?" "Ethan, we just buried your mother." He pressed on. "I know you're grieving and you aren't thinking clearly. I need the key to Mom's home office." Why, I asked. Voice raspy. I need to look for insurance policies, he said, leaning in. Funerals are expensive. Dad. And the medical bills from her cancer treatments must be piling up. I want to help you sort through the debt. I looked at him and, for the first time in my life, I didn't see my little boy. I saw a greedy stranger. You don't need to worry about the funeral. Ethan, I said coldly. I wrote the check yesterday. It's paid in full. Ethan blinked, surprised. Oh, well, that's good. But the medical bills, Dad, the hospital stay was weeks long. That could be hundreds of thousands. We might need to liquidate assets or check her accounts. I laughed. A dry, harsh sound. Liquidate assets, is that what you're calling it? Listen to me closely. Ethan, I said. I paid the hospital bill last week. $680,000 from my savings. I have never had debt since 1987. Your mother's care was paid for by me, not insurance. So you do not need to look for anything. Ethan's face went pale. He didn't know I still had that kind of liquidity. He thought I was just an old retired builder living on Social Security. But Dad, he stammered, there might be other things. Mom might have had personal debts, or a will in there. You're wearing a $45,000 watch. Ethan, I said, pointing at his wrist. He flinched and covered it. It's a fake. Dad, $50 online. I know gold. That was no fake. Go home, Ethan, I said. Go home to your wife. Leave the organizing to me. He hesitated, eyes hungry on the hallway that led to Eleanor's office. Then he left quickly. Emily kissed me on the forehead and promised to check on me tomorrow. Finally, I was alone. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The silence pressed against my ears. I sat there until the sun went down and the shadows filled the rooms. I kept thinking about Ethan's desperation to get into that office. Eleanor was a private woman. She handled household bills and kept her own checking account for groceries and hair appointments. Why would Ethan think there was anything of value in there unless he already knew something I didn't? I stood up, knees popping, and walked down the hallway to the small room Eleanor used as an office. It was locked. Always locked because she said she didn't want the grandkids messing up her quilting patterns. I didn't have the key. Ethan had asked for it, which meant he didn't have it either. But I didn't need a key. I built this door frame. I went to the garage, got a piece of high-tensile wire, and popped the lock in 10 seconds. I stepped inside. The room smelled like her. Lavender and old paper. It broke my heart all over again. Her sewing machine sat covered in the corner. Her desk was neat and tidy. I went through every drawer: utility bills, Christmas card lists, coupons clipped from the Sunday paper. Eleanor was frugal. She would drive 3 miles to save 15 cents on milk. The idea of her having secret debts was laughable. I checked the filing cabinet: tax returns, house deeds, nothing unusual. I sat in her chair feeling foolish. Maybe Ethan was just nosy. Maybe I was a paranoid old man looking for a fight to distract from the grief. Then my eyes landed on her old sewing basket on the top shelf. It was wicker, 23 years old. Ethan would never look there. It was old lady stuff to him. But I knew Eleanor hid her chocolate stash there. I reached up, took the basket down, and opened the lid. Spools of thread, needles, pincushion, and under a layer of fabric scraps, a hard rectangular object. I pulled it out. It was a green hardcover ledger, spine cracked and faded. I opened it to the first page. March 12, 2003. Eleanor's perfect cursive Tuesday. Citizens Bank. Withdrawal, $1,200. I turned the pages. Every single Tuesday for 23 years, $1,200 withdrawn in cash. 52 weeks a year times 23 years, over $1,400,000. My hands started shaking so badly I dropped the book on the desk. Where did she get that money? Eleanor was a school librarian. She didn't have millions. And even if she did, why withdraw it in cash every week? I flipped to the very last entry. Dated last Tuesday, 4 days before she died. She was so weak she could barely walk. I had driven her to the store and waited while she insisted on going into the bank next door alone. The writing was shaky, trembling, but it was there Tuesday. Citizens Bank, $1,200. And next to it, for the first time 23 years, a single word in red ink: finished. I stared at that word. Finished. What was finished? Then I remembered the watch, the gold Rolex on Ethan's wrist, the way he covered it, the way he wanted into this room. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was terrified. The next morning I was going to Citizens Bank on Charlotte Avenue in Nashville, and I was going to find out where $2 and over $1,400,000 of my wife's life had disappeared to. And if my suspicions about that Rolex were right, there was going to be a war in this family. I closed the green ledger and put it in my pocket. The funeral was over. The investigation had just begun. The next morning, I pulled my old Silverado into the parking lot of Citizens Bank. It was Tuesday. Just like the ledger said. The sun was shining, but the air was cold enough to bite through my canvas jacket. I sat in the truck for a minute watching the automatic doors. For 23 years, Eleanor had walked through those doors every Tuesday. I tried to picture her, nervous, looking over her shoulder, or walking in with her head high like she did everything else. I realized with a heavy heart that I didn't know the woman who came to this bank. I was wearing my usual work clothes, faded Carhartt pants stained with hydraulic fluid, boots that had seen better days. I have suits. I have money for expensive clothes. But I'm a builder. I'm comfortable in the clothes that built my life. I didn't think twice about it until I stepped into the lobby. The bank had been completely remodeled since I built this branch in 1999. All glass and polished steel now. Cold and impersonal. I walked up to the teller line. A young woman named Kaylee looked me up and down, eyes lingering on the fraying collar and the dirt under my fingernails. She saw an old man who probably came to cash a Social Security check or complain about a $5 fee. "Can I help you?" "Sir?" she asked, polite but dismissive. "I need to see the records for my wife's account." I said, voice rougher than I meant. Her name was Eleanor Nash. She passed away 2 weeks ago. She didn't even type anything. Just gave me a tight smile. "I'm sorry for your loss, sir, but I cannot give out account information to anyone other than the account holder. Privacy laws." I took a deep breath. "I'm her husband. I'm executor of her estate. I have ID right here." She stopped me with a raised hand. "Unless your name is on the account or you have a court order right now, I cannot help you. You'll have to make an appointment with a personal banker next week." Next week, I repeated. The green ledger was burning a hole in my pocket. "Listen, I don't need to make a withdrawal. I just need to see the history. She came here every Tuesday for 23 years. Someone here knows her." Kaylee sighed loudly. "Sir, please lower your voice or I'll call security. We have hundreds of customers. We don't track who comes in on Tuesdays." I felt the blood rush to my face. It wasn't embarrassment. It was rage. I looked around the lobby, looked at the ceiling, looked at the heavy steel vault door in the back. I pointed a calloused finger at the ceiling. "You see those trusses up there? The steel beams holding this roof over your head. I welded those. And that vault back there. I poured the reinforced concrete casing myself. I built this building while you were still in diapers. So do not tell me to step aside. Go get your branch manager. Mrs. Harper. Now. Kaylee's eyes went wide. She pressed a button and hurried away. A moment later, Mrs. Harper walked out. She was in her mid-60s, elegant and sharp. We had known each other for 25 years. She looked at Kaylee, then at me. Her face softened immediately. "Richard Nash," she said, extending her hand. "I heard about Eleanor. I'm so terribly sorry." She ignored my work clothes and shook my hand firmly. "Thank you. Mrs. Harper, I need your help. Your teller says I need a court order to know what my wife was doing here for 2 decades. Mrs. Harper looked at Kaylee, who was shrinking against the wall. "It's all right. Kaylee, Mr. Nash is a legacy client. I'll handle this." She led me back to her office, closed the door, and sat behind her desk. She looked tired. There was hesitation in her movements. "Richard," she said, using my first name. "I figured you would come in eventually. I saw the obituary." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "She was a wonderful woman." I said, "Mrs. Harper, I found a ledger. Eleanor kept records. She came here every Tuesday. The book says she moved $1,200 every time." Mrs. Harper's expression became unreadable. She adjusted her glasses. "I need to know how much is in the account," I said. "I need to know why she was saving it. Was it for the grandkids, for charity? Ethan thinks she had debts. But I know that's not true." Mrs. Harper sighed, turned to her computer, and typed for a long moment. "Richard," she said softly, "Eleanor didn't have a joint account with you here. It was a personal money market account she opened in 2003. "Okay," I said, leaning forward. "So what's the balance?" She hesitated, looked at the screen, then at me with pity in her eyes. "Mr. Nash, the balance is $18.32. I froze. $18, I repeated. "That's impossible. The ledger lists thousands of entries. $1,200 a week for 23 years. That's millions." "Mrs. Harper, where's the money?" She turned the monitor so I could see the lines of numbers. "Richard, you're misunderstanding. Eleanor wasn't depositing money. Every Tuesday, an automatic transfer came in from her teacher's pension and a small annuity she inherited from her parents. And every Tuesday, she came to the teller window and withdrew $1,200 in cash." The room started to spin. "Withdrawing," I whispered. "Where did she take it?" "We assumed she was taking it home to you." "Richard, Mrs. Harper said gently, "or using it for household expenses. She always asked for hundreds." Put the envelope in her purse, and left. She never missed a week. I sat back, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. She wasn't saving. She was bleeding. For 23 years, my wife had been draining her pension and inheritance, taking cash out of this bank and making it disappear. She didn't give it to me. I paid for everything. Her money was supposed to be hers. "Wait," I said, mind racing. "Last week, the Tuesday before she died. She was so sick. I drove her here. I watched her walk in. She withdrew money that day." Mrs. Harper nodded slowly, looking sad. "Yes, she came in. She looked terrible. Richard, I offered to help her, but she refused. She went to the teller, withdrew the last $1,200 she had available. She was shaking so badly she dropped the envelope twice." "Why?" I whispered. "Why would she do that when she was dying, Mrs. Harper took off her glasses. I don't know. But that last day, she didn't put the envelope in her purse. She walked out the back door, toward the employee parking lot. We usually don't let customers do that. But for Eleanor, we made an exception. I thanked Mrs. Harper and stood on legs that felt like jelly. I walked out through the lobby without seeing anyone. My mind was a hurricane. Eleanor wasn't saving a fortune. She was paying someone $1,200 a week, $52,000 a year, over $1,400,000 over the course of our marriage. She had been paying someone in cash for 23 years, and she made sure to make the final payment even when she was on her deathbed. Who had that kind of hold on my wife who could make a dying woman drag herself to a bank to hand over cash? I walked out to my truck. The rain had started again. I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the steering wheel. I thought about the green ledger. I thought about the word finished in red ink. Whatever debt she was paying, whatever blackmail she was under, it ended when she died. Or she paid it off just in time. A cold rage began building inside me, replacing the grief. Someone had done this to her. Someone had bled her dry. I started the truck. I wasn't going home. I was going to find out who was waiting in that back parking lot, and God help them when I did. I drove home from the bank with the green ledger sitting on the passenger seat like a loaded gun. The rain had turned into a cold drizzle that matched the gray inside the cab of my Silverado. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was racing 100 miles an hour. I kept seeing that word written in red ink, finished. I kept seeing the balance, $18.32. And I kept seeing the flash of gold on my son's wrist. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to wait. I pulled into the driveway of the house that suddenly felt too big and too empty without Eleanor. I walked inside and went straight to the landline in the kitchen. I called Emily first. She answered on the second ring, voice thick with grief. I told her to come over for supper. Then I called Ethan. He sounded wary, asked if I had found the insurance papers yet. I told him I had picked up a bucket of fried chicken and didn't want to eat alone. It was a lie, but I knew he would come. He was sniffing around for money like a bloodhound, and he wouldn't miss a chance to get back inside the house. An hour later, we were sitting around the oak dining table I built 40 years ago. I hadn't bothered with the good china. We ate off paper plates, me, Emily, and Ethan. The house was silent except for the rain tapping the windows and the scrape of plastic forks. Emily looked tired. She was picking at her coleslaw, eyes red-rimmed. She missed her mother. I could see it in the slump of her shoulders. But Ethan was different. He was eating fast, nervously. His eyes kept darting around the room, scanning shelves, cabinets, the hallway that led to Eleanor's office. He still had that Rolex on. He kept his left hand under the table most of the time. So, Dad, Ethan said, wiping grease from his mouth with a napkin. Did you manage to get into Mom's office, find anything important? I stopped chewing. I looked at him. He was 44 years old, but right then he looked like a teenager hiding a bad report card. I put my fork down, reached into my flannel shirt pocket, and pulled out the green ledger. I didn't say a word. I just tossed it onto the center of the table. It landed with a heavy thud between the mashed potatoes and the biscuits. The effect was instant. Ethan froze. His fork clattered onto his plate. His face went chalk white. He stared at that green cover like it was a rattlesnake. He knew exactly what it was. What is that? Emily asked, confused. She reached out to touch it, but I gently put my hand over hers. Ask your brother, I said. voice low and dangerous. He seems to recognize it. Ethan swallowed hard. I don't know what you're talking about. Dad, just an old notebook. Don't lie to me, boy, I snapped. My voice cracked like a whip in the quiet room. I went to the bank today. Ethan, I spoke to Mrs. Harper. I know about the withdrawals. Every Tuesday. $1,200 for 23 years. Over $1,400,000 gone. Emily gasped. She looked at me, then at Ethan, eyes wide with shock. $1,400,000. She did, I said, never taking my eyes off my son. She had her pension. She had an inheritance I never touched. And she drained every penny. And I think Ethan knows exactly where it went. Ethan pushed his chair back so hard it screeched against the hardwood. Sweat beaded on his forehead. Okay, look, Dad, he stammered. Hands up. I didn't want you to know. Mom made me promise. She begged me not to tell you. It was her secret. What secret I demanded. She had a problem. Dad, Ethan said, voice dropping. A sickness. She was addicted to gambling. Online poker. Slots in Mississippi. She started back in the 80s and couldn't stop. She lost everything. I tried to help her manage it, but she was out of control. I stared at him. The silence stretched tight. Gambling, Emily said, voice full of disbelief. Mom, our mom, yes, Ethan insisted. Gaining confidence now that the lie was out. She hid it well. She was ashamed. That's why she went to the bank every week, to pay debts, to buy prepaid cards so it wouldn't show on statements. She didn't want to disappoint you. Dad, she loved you too much. I listened to my son murder his mother's character. I listened to him paint my Eleanor as a degenerate gambler. And I felt a cold certainty settle in my gut. I looked at Emily. She was shaking her head. That's impossible. Ethan, Mom didn't even know how to use a smartphone. Remember last Christmas, I tried to teach her FaceTime, and she thought the government was spying through the camera. She still used a flip phone from 2006. You're telling me she was playing online poker for 23 years, Ethan flushed red. It wasn't just online. Emily, there were underground games, local stuff. You didn't know her like I did. She confided in me. I looked down at my scarred, calloused hands. I remembered Eleanor clipping coupons, walking 3 miles to the grocery store in July heat because gas was too expensive, darning my socks because she refused to buy new ones. Eleanor didn't gamble. She didn't even play bingo at church. My son was lying with a lazy, stupid lie. But I didn't scream. I didn't reach across the table and shake him until his teeth rattled. Even though that's exactly what I wanted to do, I needed to be smarter. If I cornered him now, he would lawyer up, hide the money, disappear. I needed to catch him red-handed. I let my shoulders slump. I let my face crumble into defeated old age. I rubbed my eyes. Gambling, I whispered, shaking my head. My Eleanor. I can't believe it. It's the truth. Dad, Ethan said quickly, seizing the opening. She was sick, but it's over now. The money's gone. We just have to protect her memory. I sighed a long, rattling breath. I suppose you're right, son. If she spent it, she spent it. I'm just tired. So tired. You should rest. Dad, Ethan said, standing, relief flooding his face. He thought he had won. We should go. Let you sleep. Emily looked worried. Dad, are you sure this doesn't make sense? It's okay, sweetheart, I said, patting her hand. Your brother's right. We can't change the past. Go home. Kiss those babies for me. I walked them to the door. Ethan practically ran to his car. Emily hugged me tight and promised to check on me tomorrow. I stood in the doorway watching their taillights disappear down the long driveway. Then I straightened my back. The fatigue vanished. The grief was pushed down deep where I could ignore it for now. I went back to the kitchen and picked up the phone. I didn't call a financial advisor. I didn't call the police. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 6 years but still knew by heart. It rang 4 times. "Yeah," a gravelly voice answered. "Ray," I said. "It's Richard Nash." Pause. I heard the flick of a lighter. The inhale of a cigarette. "Richard, I heard about Eleanor. I'm real sorry, man. She was a saint. She was... Ray, listen, I need a favor. A big one. Tonight, I'm retired. Richard, knees shot. Liver worse. I know. But this is about family. And it involves that bank branch I built downtown Citizens on Charlotte Avenue." I heard him exhale smoke. "What do you need security tapes?" I said. Voice turning cold. "Rear exterior camera facing the employee lot. Every Tuesday for the last 2 months. Especially last week. That's a tall order. Banks don't hand that over. You installed the upgraded system 3 years ago as a contractor. You still have the master override codes. You bragged about it at poker night." Ray chuckled. Dry and raspy. "Good memory for an old man. Why do you need it? I think someone was robbing my wife." "Ray, for 23 years. And I think I know who." Silence. Then, "All right. Meet me at my place in 20. Bring good whiskey." I hung up, went to the liquor cabinet, and pulled out the bottle of 25-year Pappy Van Winkle I'd been saving for our 50th anniversary. I wouldn't be needing it for celebration anymore. I grabbed my keys and the green ledger. I was done being the grieving widower. Tonight I was the man who built bridges and tore down obstacles. Ethan thought he could lie about gambling, thought he could tarnish his mother's name to cover his greed. He was about to learn you don't steal from a man who knows how to pour concrete over a problem. I drove through the rain to the outskirts of Knoxville where Ray lived in a converted shipping container behind a salvage yard. To most folks, it looked like junk. But inside was enough computing power to hack the Pentagon. Ray opened the door before I knocked. Same as 30 years ago. Just grayer and thinner. He wore a stained undershirt. Cigarette dangling from his lip. The air inside hit like a wall stale tobacco. Ozone. Old coffee. He nodded at the bottle, stepped aside. I walked in. Server racks, cooling fans, wires everywhere. In the center, 3 huge monitors glowed blue. I sat on a creaking metal chair. Ray cracked the pappy, took a long pull, handed it to me. I drank. It burned good. "Still got the backdoor admin access from the install," Ray said, fingers flying across the keyboard. They never changed the passwords. Lazy. Screens flickered. Code scrolled. Then the feed appeared grainy black and white. Rear exterior camera of Citizens Bank. Employee lot. Let's start a month back. Ray said, "Establish pattern." He typed a date. Tuesday, 4 weeks ago. At 10:17 a.m. The back door opened. My breath caught. There was Eleanor in her winter coat, leather purse over her shoulder. She looked nervous, glancing left and right. She walked toward the shadowed corner of the lot. A dark SUV with tinted windows pulled in slowly. No plates visible. It stopped. Eleanor walked to the passenger window. It cracked open just enough. She pulled a thick white envelope from her purse and pushed it through. The window closed. The SUV drove off without a word. "Next week," I said. Voice tight. Same time, same routine. Envelope handed over. SUV gone. Cold. Efficient. Heartless. "Go to last Tuesday," I whispered. The day before she got too weak to leave the bed. Ray hesitated. "Richard, you sure I need to see who did this to her?" He clicked. "Timestamp last Tuesday." The back door opened slowly. Eleanor appeared. I made a sound halfway between a sob and a growl. She had a scarf wrapped around her bald head from the chemo. Her coat hung off her like a tent. She stumbled, crossing the threshold, had to lean against the brick wall, chest heaving. She shouldn't have been out of bed, but she was here to pay a debt she didn't owe. The dark SUV appeared fast, stopping inches from her, Eleanor pushed off the wall, legs shaking. She reached into her purse with trembling hands, pulled out the envelope. She tapped on the glass, probably begging for help. The window came down halfway. She tried to hand it over, but her hand shook so badly the envelope fell to the wet pavement. She bent slowly, painfully, picked it up, offered it again. A hand shot out, not gentle, snatched the envelope, grabbed part of her sleeve, and yanked. Eleanor lost balance, slammed her shoulder into the side mirror, and fell to her knees on the asphalt. The hand didn't come back to help. The door didn't open. The window rolled up and the SUV peeled out, tires spinning, spraying her with dirty water. She stayed on her knees a long time before using the wall to pull herself up and limp away. I was shaking with rage so pure it felt like molten steel in my veins. Freeze it, I barked. When the hand comes out, freeze it right there. Ray tapped a key. The image froze. The hand was blurred in motion. Clean it up, enhance it. I need to see that arm. Ray ran filters, sharpened, adjusted contrast. The image cleared, a man's arm in a dark long-sleeve shirt. And on the wrist, a glint of gold. Zoom in. Ray zoomed. Pixels expanded, then sharpened. A large gold watch. I knew every link, every curve. A Rolex President. The exact watch I had stared at in the rain at the cemetery. I stared at the screen, trying to find another explanation. Maybe lots of people have gold Rolexes, but in Nashville, in that parking lot, collecting cash from my dying wife, no. Then I saw the ring on the finger, heavy gold with a black onyx stone. My father's college ring. The one I gave Ethan when he graduated Vanderbilt. There was no doubt left. The man who watched his mother fall to her knees and drove away. The man who had bled her dry for 23 years. Was my own son. Ethan. My flesh and blood. The boy I taught to ride a bike, to fish, to swing a hammer. He had watched her waste away from cancer and kept taking her money until her very last breath. Ray looked at me. He saw the recognition. He poured whiskey into a dirty mug and handed it over. You know him, don't you? Richard. I took the mug. My hand was steady now. The shaking had stopped. It had been replaced by cold, hard resolve. Yeah, I said. I know him. I took a sip. It tasted like ash. Can you print that high-resolution still of the wrist and the watch? Done, Ray said. He printed 2 copies. I folded one carefully and put it in my pocket next to the green ledger. I stood up. I felt heavy, but strong. Thanks, Ray. I owe you. You don't owe me nothing, Ray said, looking at the screen with disgust. Just make sure it hurts. It will, I said. It will hurt more than anything he's ever felt. I walked out into the night. The rain had stopped, but the air was freezing. I got in my truck and started the engine. I wasn't going to confront Ethan tonight. He would deny everything. Say he lent the car to a friend. Say the watch was stolen. No. I needed to know why. The ledger started in 2003. Ethan was 21 then. What happened in 2003 that gave him this power over his own mother? I drove home slowly, digging through 23 years of memories. I went straight to the basement, pulled the chain on the single bulb, and started hauling down bankers' boxes. I found the one marked 2003, 2004. I ripped off the tape, invoices, timesheets, safety reports. Then I found the red-tabbed file incident report, May 22, 2003 I-40 overpass project. I remembered that day like it was burned into my soul. We were raising the main suspension support. A scaffolding collapse. A young worker named Ramirez fell 35 feet and was paralyzed for life. The investigation almost bankrupted Nash Construction. OSHA said a critical safety pin had been deliberately removed. I spent 5 years working 18-hour days to keep the doors open. I always thought it was sabotage by a rival contractor. Now I wondered. 3 days later, I drove 4 hours to a memory care home in Chattanooga. I found Stanley Brooks, my old foreman from 2003, now 89, barely knowing his own name. But when I showed him a photo of 21-year-old Ethan drunk on the job site, something sparked. Stanley started crying. He was messing with the crane controls. He whispered. Thought it was funny. Knocked the pin clean out. I saw it. I was scared. A man came to me that night. Told me what to write in a letter. Said I'd go to prison for the rest of my life if I didn't. Said he'd make sure my family suffered. I wrote it. I'm sorry, Mr. Nash. I've carried that guilt for 23 years. Stanley had been the fake witness. Ethan had caused the accident. Then used the threat of exposure to terrorize his own mother into paying him $1,200 a week for the rest of her life. The payments started exactly 9 months after the accident. Right after Ethan turned 21 and realized Eleanor would do anything to keep her boy out of prison and protect my company. I drove home with the truth burning a hole straight through my heart. But I still needed the hard, physical proof that would stand up in a criminal court. The following week, Ethan filed an emergency petition for guardianship and conservatorship, claiming grief had caused me to suffer a psychotic break and early-onset dementia. He said I was squandering the estate on private investigators and was a danger to myself. The hearing was set for Monday morning, an ex parte emergency hearing. I had less than 72 hours, and the judge had already frozen my major assets. I could not withdraw more than $100, but I had something Ethan didn't count on: the keys to the house I built for him 12 years ago, and the knowledge of every nail, stud, and screw in it. Friday night, I waited down the street until I saw Ethan and his wife leave in a stretched limousine for some charity gala. Laughing, champagne flutes in hand. They thought they had won. I waited another 20 minutes, then walked through the side gate, the latch still broken, because Ethan never fixed it, and went to the back door. Solid mahogany, multi-point lock. Impossible for a normal burglar. But I had hung that door. I knew the heavy brass hinges were on the outside. I took a flathead screwdriver and hammer from my tool belt, popped the pins, lifted the entire door out of the frame, and leaned it against the wall. No broken glass. No alarm triggered. I was in. I went straight to the second-floor office, swung aside the ugly hunting painting, and faced the wall safe. 4-digit code. I tried birthdays, wedding anniversary. Nothing. 400. Then I thought, like Ethan, narcissistic, lazy, cruel. I typed Eleanor's birthday, 070446. The light turned green. The safe opened. My stomach turned. He had used the woman he was robbing as the combination. A private joke only he knew. Inside were thick bundles of cash still in Citizens Bank bands. 3 passports, Swiss and Cayman account books showing balances in the tens of millions, and a rubber-banded stack of yellowed papers. Practice sheets where Ethan had perfected the block-letter handwriting of the original blackmail note. Drafts with crossed-out lines. Trophies. He kept them as trophies of how clever he was. I took everything cash. Passports, account books, every letter. I closed the safe, rehung the painting, rehung the door, tapped the pins back in, and walked out with $5 million of evidence in a canvas bag. I drove home at midnight. The bag on the seat beside the green ledger. Ethan was probably ordering dessert right then, laughing about how he had finally beaten the old man. Saturday morning, I spread every piece of evidence across the kitchen table and called Emily. When she walked in and saw the cash, the letters, her brother's handwriting threatening their mother, she collapsed into a chair and sobbed. I held her while she read draft after draft where Ethan practiced terrorizing Eleanor. When she could speak again, her eyes were blazing. "I want to kill him," she whispered. "No," I said. "We're going to destroy him legally, publicly, permanently. But I need your help tonight." We made a plan. Emily would hide in the walk-in pantry with bear spray. I removed the fuse for the dining room lights so the room would stay dim and oppressive. I called Ethan and put on the most broken, defeated voice I could manage. "Ethan, I can't do this anymore. I'm tired. I want to sign the papers. Bring everything tonight. Just promise you'll let me stay in my house." He could barely hide his excitement. "Of course. Dad, I'll bring Mr. Sterling, my attorney, to notarize. 7 o'clock. He arrived at 6:58 with a bottle of Dom Perignon and his sleazy lawyer, grinning ear to ear. I let him push the thick stack of guardianship papers across the table. I let him watch me pick up the fountain pen. I let him think he had won. Then I set a small digital recorder on top of the papers and pressed play. Stanley Brooks's voice filled the room, confessing everything. I reached under the tablecloth and dumped the canvas bag. Cash, passports, account books. 23 years of blackmail letters spilled across Ethan's perfect legal documents. Ethan lunged for the letters. Screaming, the pantry door burst open. Emily stepped out, bear spray raised, tears of fury on her face. "Get away from him." At that exact moment, the bedroom door opened. Sheriff Dawson and my attorney, Mr. Henderson, walked in. They had been listening on a live feed the entire time. Ethan's face collapsed. He went from predator to prey in a heartbeat. Sheriff Dawson read him his rights while cuffing him extortion, elder abuse, fraud, money laundering, tax evasion. His wife filed for divorce before the cruiser reached the station. The offshore accounts were seized. The house went into foreclosure. 30 days later, it was all gone. I sold our old house, put half the recovered money into a trust for Emily and the grandkids, and bought a 40-foot diesel pusher motorhome. Yesterday, I stood at Eleanor's grave one last time. I took out the green ledger and lit it with my Zippo. I watched 23 years of terror curl into ash and blow away across the Tennessee hills. "It's really finished now, darling," I whispered to the stone. "You're free. You can rest." Then I climbed behind the wheel of my new RV, put Eleanor's picture on the dash, released the brake, and pointed west. For the first time in 72 years, the road ahead belongs to me, and it feels like pure freedom. As I drive west under endless skies, I still think about Ethan every day, not with hatred anymore. Hatred takes too much energy. I think of him with sorrow, the deep, heavy kind that settles in your bones. He was my boy once. I taught him how to hold a hammer, how to measure twice and cut once, how to look a man in the eye and keep your word. Somewhere along the way, I failed to teach him that greed is a slow poison, and family is the only thing worth protecting. Eleanor carried that terrible secret alone to shield all of us. She thought her silence was love. She thought paying forever would keep the peace. But real love draws lines. Real love says no when someone is destroying themselves, and everyone around them. She learned that too late, and it cost her everything. Emily is healing now. She visits her brother in prison once a month. Not to forgive, but to make sure he never forgets the pain he caused. That is her boundary, and I respect it. This story is not about revenge. It is about truth. Truth is the only thing that finally sets the captive free. If someone in your life is bleeding you dry, emotionally, financially, or spiritually. Hear me, silence is not protection. It is slow death. Speak up. Get help. Draw the line. You deserve peace, and so do the people who truly love you. If this old man's long road to justice moved you, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who might need to hear they are not alone. Drop a comment and tell me your story, or just say where you are watching from today. And if you want to ride along as I chase the horizon, subscribe and ring that bell. The road is wide open, and there is room for all of us. Take care of each other out there.